Hello, everybody. I am Steve Wolfson, evolutionary astrologer, among other things. And it is for the sake of people who will be watching this in the future, it is March 31st, 2022, a few hours before a new moon in Aries, conjunct Chiron, which I was not planning that way. It just worked out that that happens to be a lot of what I'm talking about, not so much the actual aspect, but what we feel and what's going on as a result of that. So this talk is called A Moment of Heart in a Time of Pain, because at this time in late March, uh, there is a lot of pain going on from all sorts. I want to read, because people will be listening to this later who didn't see the write-up, but a few paragraphs that I wrote describing what I'm talking about. Between the coming of spring, drought in the West, division in the capital, Washington, the perhaps temporarily receding 2 years of pandemic, and the heartbreaking war in Ukraine, many emotional plates are pretty full, including mine. Yes, the transits reveal all of this change, but they don't inherently hold space for the spectrum of emotions that inevitably arise from all of this. I would like to take a moment to pause, to honor, to feel, to support and validate all that many of us are feeling. It is okay and necessary that we feel all that may be rising within us at this moment in time. Yes, it has its purpose. Yes, it's part of the growth, in the growth, but it doesn't always feel great or smooth or certain. The very sense of what reality may be seems to be shifting somewhat dramatically at this time. If it would feel good to spend a few minutes in a space where it's okay to be wherever you are, to feel whatever you feel, whether up or down or both, or good or bad or crazy, feel crazy or feel grateful, or both. Let's share that space together for just a little while. And that's the backdrop. Um, my little preface for people who may be new to my talk is that I trained with Jeffrey Wolf Green, Pluto evolutionary astrology for a long time. And I've been doing EA for about 20 years. And at a certain point, 7 or 8 years ago, my focus started changing, and because I had done a lot of readings, with communicating a lot of helpful information to people based on the evolutionary astrology interpretation of charts, and at a certain point, it sort of caught up with me, meaning that I started not realizing, I started being shown that I was good at pointing these things out, but I wasn't as good, even for myself, as actually integrating and living the very things that were being pointed out as growth. And this started a whole new phase and cycle in my life. And so my focus nowadays is much more not on passing along astrological information, although I do that when I feel it's appropriate, but in working with people on, well, how do I integrate this? You know, astrology may tell you, well, you need to do this and go in that direction and stop going in that direction and all this. And, you know, we know, okay, so I know that. but I have no idea how to do it. And that's the key. I have no idea how to do it. And so what I've been on my own path of integrating and learning uh, how to work with my wounds and how to move myself forward. And interestingly enough, coming to the realization that a huge part of the quote solution or direction for that was actually learning how to be much kinder to myself than I had ever dreamed possible. And not kinder in kind of fake and happy, what I call happy ways, but delving into the parts of myself that really hurt, that were really painful, that I couldn't stand having or being or coming from, and learning to have how to have compassion for these different parts of myself, and how to understand how they came to be that way. A lot of this stuff, most of this stuff comes out of childhood. Being a Pluto astrologer, I can say, it comes from past lives also, but my perspective is the sum total of whatever, wherever and whatever we were in the past lives is what we brought into childhood. And that's what we're working out. And so whatever we experienced, my feeling is that we come here to work the stuff out. It's not an easy planet to work the stuff out, in case anyone hasn't noticed, because we get born into imperfect parents. Sometimes I have sort of a whimsical or ironic sense of humor. One of my things has been for a long time, whose brilliant idea was it that 22, 24, 26-year-old people who are still trying to work out their own craziness from childhood are the ones who get to raise another whole generation of children. I say it humorously, and it's the way that it is. So the question is, what do we do with it? I have come to the increasing realization over the years that there are no mistakes in what unfolds in any of our lives. And also the increasing realization that zero of what happens to us is some form of cosmic punishment or retribution of, bad karma and all this. We have unresolved, we get born with unresolved places from where we were before, series of lives. They're unresolved. We haven't resolved it. We haven't been living on a planet where the level of overall awareness or consciousness created the knowledge of how to resolve a lot of things, how to deal with grief, how to deal with anger, how to deal with sadness, how to deal with what seems like vast inequality, unfairness, selfishness, wounds, all this. But more and more I see that all of the behaviors that bug the hell out of me, around me, are coming from people who themselves are very wounded, and they don't know they're very wounded. and they're angry or hurt or broken or sad, and their behavior comes from this. Now, you can't, that's not an excuse for abusive behavior, but it is a source of abusive behavior. And, this is really changing my perspective on what is going on or how I view things. Instead of wanting to hurt or get back or even hold accountable in a punitive, judgmental, shaming way, the actions of people, is realizing it is their shame, the way they have been treated, that is underlying why they act in the various ways that they act. And so giving them more of that in that way is not going to really help bring healing. I don't have all the answers, but I get clearer and clearer that, it's a saying, almost a cliche, be the change. But I find the truth of that at deeper and deeper levels. The problem in the world, or an underlying problem in the world, is we have 7 billion greater or lesser traumatized, hurt, wounded individuals in the world. And so all the behaviors come out of that. And so in a very real way, the greatest contribution I can make to the world is to learn to heal my own wounds, my own traumas, my own neuroses, my own weak points. I don't even like what I just said, weak, not weak points, but places that I'm not satisfied with, that I wish to do better. But the strategy that is quite common of, being mad at ourselves, hating myself, what I call beating myself up, about beating myself up. That's when you get on a spiritual or waking up path. You start realizing you're beating yourself up, so you determine you're going to stop beating yourself up. Then you find that you're beating yourself up again, and so then you start beating yourself up about beating yourself up. No, that's the indicator. This is where change needs to come. I can be kind to myself. I can be the one who can give me what I feel like I haven't received in life, what I didn't receive as a child, even though the people in my childhood were well-meaning, but they did not have the awareness, the growth in their own life to be able to do any better or any more for me. I can learn to do this for myself. And it's retraining and reframing of everything. And, so the part about the moment of heart is there's a lot of stuff going on now that is just extremely depressing. What is happening in Ukraine, and I'll preface it by saying, like everything else in life, we live in a dualistic polarity reality. And so the extremes of heartbreak and horrendous behavior that are occurring also create the space for people to operate from heroic levels of heart, of kindness. My partner's first generation Polish. Her parents came here after World War II, after destruction. And so it's very personal. or hurt. And, I've been watching the depths of emotion that this has brought out of her. And Poland is not, it's not a poor country, but it's not a wealthy country. And they have taken in 2 million people into their country and given people are letting people they don't even know stay in their house. The government is giving them food and health benefits and all this. They're rising to this occasion. And it's the extremes of what to me is the unwholesome behavior that creates the circumstance in which these acts of kindness and love and caring, even for strangers, can occur. That is the paradox and the dichotomy of being a human being. And to me, this is how I'm looking at it more and more. And it's like we have choice in every moment. The drives that drive us, and the ones that drive us crazy, that are internal, they're not conscious. They're not conscious. This is our subconscious. This is our defense system that has survived all kinds of things that are very difficult, that we don't like to think about, and that has unconsciously learned these parts of ourself that are wounded, that are hurt, that don't act, quote, rationally some of the time, that get triggered, that bring up old trauma, are really there trying to protect us, keep us safe, and are doing the best they know how. And that's why each of us is still alive. Not everyone has faced a life-threatening circumstance where their physical existence was in question. But almost everybody has faced, especially as younger, when we're innocent and just more wide open, emotional circumstances, psychic circumstances that were emotionally threatening, that cause us to shut down, or that cause us to defend or act out in deep anger, trying to protect, trying to feel safe. And these parts operate automatically. That this is the amazing brain, nervous system, body, and physical apparatus that we operate in as a human being on Earth. It all happens, it's all in the wiring. It's like the operating system. And we don't think about it. But the issue becomes, as we grow and become more whole, we start reaching points of realizing that the automatic responses that I have are not really serving me any longer. They worked. They kept me going. They kept me alive. They kept me safe. But they may not be wholesome. They may not be totally realistic. They may not be taking into account other people because they're operating from fear and trauma. And so as this wholeness, as this self-love and self-acceptance deepens and grows, there comes the time where I have to start to notice my own unconscious patterns, how I act out in stressful circumstances. One of the best laboratories for this I am finding, which I did not know, is relationship. I'm referring particularly to what we call romantic relationship. I don't intimate relationship, not um, the same dynamics apply in family and to lesser degree with friends and work relationships and so forth, but particularly in the closest relationships where there's not a way that I can always put my best happy face forward. I just came across the term yesterday, somebody describing it as people, especially with the internet and social media and all that the way it is now, that in general, people like to present what this person called a photoshopped version of themselves. It's not who they really are. I used to see it like in dating type of situations when younger. I mean, we're all presenting ourselves in our most likable form, uh, which is, I'm not saying that's wrong or bad. That's like the advertisement that the purpose of the advertisement is to get you to buy something. And so it's presented, the product, whatever it is presented in the most glorious way. We wouldn't buy it if it weren't. So it's the same in our relationships or in trying to get, having a job interview or any kind of place where we need to present ourselves. Most people, I'm going to shift a little bit here. One of the things I've observed for a long time is that the last place that most people want to go is to feel their pain. Feel their pain. I feel like the entire underlying premise of addictions of all sorts, physical, drugs and alcohol, yes, but all addictions, is to try to avoid feeling certain feelings that we feel, that 7 billion of us feel, and that it is not okay. People don't like people who are feeling certain kinds of feelings, who feel certain kinds of feelings. Like grief is a perfect example. People are very uncomfortable, for the most part, with people who are deeply feeling various deep emotions. They don't want to be around it. They don't want to go there. They will change the subject or leave the room at the earliest opportunity. And again, this is an observation on my part, not a judgment. I understand why. I've had my own version of it. But, more and more I see, it's like we live in a culture that is pleasure seeking, that wants to experience things that are fun and uplifting and happy all the time. 1 second. That's the nature of our culture. That's what a whole lot of products are sold by. I'm going to go here and go there and do this and do that and have fun. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But the interesting thing about it is, at a certain point, you have so much fun And then you start realizing that somehow or other, despite all of that, despite all you have acquired, all you are interested in, you still feel empty inside at times. The feeling, and it's like, what do I have to do to get away from that? This is why I feel like things like death, um, upheaval of routine and norms. Here in the where I live, a couple of years ago, we had a wildfire go through, and 2,500 houses were wiped out in an area where the total population of that area is probably about 15 or 20,000 people. I mean, this is utter, like, everything you have gone. Sudden death of a loved one, or even a death that took a long time, but the loss, the sense of loss. We are not generally equipped to handle that. Our culture does not do this. It's not taught. But, you know, one of the great truths of being a human being is there's 7 billion people, and every single last person that's here is going to die. And we, especially in Western culture, it seems to me, we are sort of taught to live in a world where that's just not ever going to happen. And when it does happen, it's horrific. What I'm getting at is more and more I see what I'll call emotions as like colors on a painter's palette. And there's an entire spectrum of colors. And the thing is, I mean, it's not important that I like grief. It's not important that I like feeling depressed, or feeling angry, or any other feeling that I don't consider to be enjoyable or fun or whatnot. I don't have to like them, but they're part of this existence. And in denying them, in not wanting to go anywhere near them, and changing the subject when the mere mention arises, we're literally cutting ourselves off from important parts, not just of life, but of my life. You know, I had one period in my life about 25 years ago, and for a short period of time, there was a lot going on. I was beginning to get divorced after a somewhat long marriage. And I was on antidepressants for a short while. And I had been all over the map. I was bouncing back and forth between being high off the charts into being, like deeply depressed, and it would flip back and forth rapidly. And I was a little like, I don't know what's going on. And it was very interesting because my short experience with antidepressants was it became impossible for me to feel sad. Literally, the emotion of sad was taken off the palette. And at the time, that was good. It was like, well, that's a nice experience, but it seemed really strange to me because it was like, well, sad is just an emotion. I mean, it's not like something bad or terrible that you can just make go away. And, you know, they had done the brain research or whatever to literally be able to repress that emotion. And even though I felt better and happier. And I think I say that as a short-term tool at certain points in life. Um, Antidepressants are a good idea and are fine, but they're not a long-term substitute, because part of what I've noticed, part of what I get depressed about is things I don't like feeling. And rather than feel them, I kind of emotionally shut down. And that emotional shutdown is what gets labeled depression. It's like a loss of interest or meaning or feeling or caring or motivation. And, we judge that as bad. We judge that as difficult and painful, which I agree it is. But it's interesting because over the last number of years, a few times I have had the experience of saying, well, you know what? I'm just going to dive in. I've been fighting this thing off forever. I've been afraid of it. I've been running from it. And I've just allowed myself, okay, so I have these fears, I'm going to lose my mind. I might die. I'm going to go crazy. La, 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 la. And so I just dove in. And it was very interesting because as I accepted, oh, that's where I'm feeling right now. Didn't take that long where the whole feeling passed. It just passed. And it comes back from time to time, but it's not been the same as it used to be for me since then. And out of this, I have come to realize, and I have a partner who's very tuned into this and has helped me tremendously in realizing that it is all about feeling emotion, all emotion, and not being ashamed of it. I got shamed when I was a child for being angry. I was like a scapegoat of the family because I was so angry. I rarely ever saw my parents be angry with each other. How realistic is that? I was acting out anger. And so I, as I look at it as an adult, was expressing an emotion that was not okay for others in the household to express. Therefore, when they see that emotion being expressed, kind of freaks them out. And so this child got labeled the angry child. Everybody in the family knew I was an angry child, all this. Well, lo and behold, hard to believe, I haven't really liked expressing anger as an adult, or even admitting to myself that I'm angry, or even to say, oh, I'm angry. It's, can you imagine that? So if you get shamed for feeling something as a child and as an adult, how willing are you want to be? How much do you want to walk around expressing from the very thing that causes people to turn off to you, to judge you, to not want to be around you? Until catching on that this is what's going on, that's pretty much what you want to do. You don't want to show up in those ways. And I look at it now, by denying anger. Now, there's a difference between acknowledging anger and acting out anger. In fact, acting out anger I find, is typically a strategy of not acknowledging or owning the anger. What comes to mind immediately is these, what I've heard in like domestic violence kind of situations, like, look what you've made me do now. It's your fault that I'm angry at you, or in worst case, that I'm going to be physically violent on you. It's your fault, not mine. That's shame. That's shame. Owning the anger is, I feel really angry. I would have reason to feel really angry, but it's not okay to feel the reasons. I find in myself a lot of times that anger is actually a protective emotion, and it is covering up deeper emotions so I don't have to feel them. And one of the deepest of them I find is shame. I was, I was shamed a lot when I was a child for acting. Now, why does somebody shame another person? Why do I shame people, which I unconsciously do at times? Because they have the same sort of shame underneath, and they're not going to go there. So instead of feeling what I'm feeling, I go into a defensive mode. Oh yeah, well, you think I'm that? Well, yeah, well, what about this and you? You know, um, what's the difference? You're okay, you're okay doing that, but you're not okay when I do essentially the same thing, blah, blah, blah. So the gist of it, what I'm finding is that what it boils down to, the bottom line is that because I have been shamed, I shame myself. I have learned to feel shame. I take it on. I've learned from the way that I was responded to. I've taken on the voices of my parents, of others inside, they're living in me. And so I'm shaming me, and then I don't want to feel that. So then I just shut it down. Well, lo and behold, like anger, like grief, like the other emotions, what I'm finding is all of these represent wounds, um, hurt places in myself. This is not only for me, hurt places that as an innocent child did not receive what they wanted. The parent, for whatever reasons, I mean, oftentimes they're valid. There wasn't anything else the parent could do. They didn't know how to do anything differently. But the child didn't receive what it wanted. And then it goes into various kinds of survival modes. Shutting down is a good one. If I don't have to feel all the pain, then I don't have to bear feeling all that. But the interesting thing is in discovering and realizing that the adult Steve has done enough inner work that has the capacity to reparent these child places that are still in me, which we all have. The little boy places, the little girl places that are left over, that are hungry, that are angry, that are love starved, that are scared to death, terrified, that pop up. And when I'm not acknowledging that these are there, that take over. Hijacked is one way this is described. It's when you get triggered, when you get traumatized, when all of a sudden you're not yourself, you're not your adult self, all of a sudden you're a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old, very needy. And wanting whoever you're in this incident with you're either mad at them or wanting them or feeling very small and wanting them to take care of you and hold you emotionally or physically. And I feel to say here, none of this is bad. Okay. The very idea that any of this is bad or wrong, or I should know better, or I shouldn't be in this place and all that, that is the problem. To me, what is happening, I'm going to shift a little bit here again. To me, what is going on now, and as to why the world, large portions of the world at times seem like they're going crazy, to me, the energies, the spiritual energies, the awakening energies are accelerating at a profound rate. A rate of change is being called into our world at a pace that is so rapid that we literally cannot integrate it at the pace that it's occurring. The lights have turned on and they're very bright. And the brightness of that light is shining on a lot of things within each person that they don't want to see. They can't see, they can't acknowledge, they can't own because of what it would say about them. Because there are places inside that cannot stand some of the things that we do. There's places in us that cannot stand some of the things we do. And so rather than face those feelings, we just act out. Now, we clearly have some people on this planet that to me is the issue behind all these things that are going on. I don't really want to bring names into it. I think they're relatively obvious. It's this collected, disowned shame. And the light is shining brightly, and it's pointing on each person, pointing out these places. And the lighter, if you're invested in not looking and blaming your issues on other people or someone else, then it's more work and you have to act out more louder in order to keep this belief structure going, because the light is shining brighter. In the last week, I have heard that various, not tiny number of voices in one of the parties wants to do, in addition to totally outlawing abortion, wants to go back to where contraception is illegal, interracial marriage is illegal. In other words, this is trying to go backwards 30 years, 50 years, 150 years. And they may get away with some of it for a period of time. Like I call this late Pluto in Capricorn. It's when the authority, because the sense that everything is changing, that the light is coming on at an accelerated pace. And people that are invested in benefiting from the old structures, they don't know that that's what's going on, but within them is this terrible fear of losing what they have. They're in total denial of that fear. They can't face the fear, feel the fear. And so the behaviors need to become increasingly extreme just in order to try to keep everything the way that it has been. You cannot keep everything the way that has been. And there can be tremendous suffering out of that process, which is heartbreaking. But this is part of the collective evolution. You know, I'll say a few sentences about that. These are my personal opinions. They may be, not everyone may agree with it. But it's what I've come to, is that despite the horrendous suffering that some and perhaps many individuals will experience, there's nothing that occurs in our life that is not part of our soul growth. And I absolutely put the footnote on that. I'm not talking about bad karma and cosmic retribution and all this. That's not the way I see things anymore. We cannot understand the bigger picture. I'll give this as a metaphor. I have felt for a long, long time, and I feel more and more that I'm correct, that when I die, from the perspective of soul, which I go back to, the entire lifetime I just lived is going to seem like it was about 15 minutes long. That's soul time. That's soul time. That's not human time. In the human time, we go through a whole lot of stuff and a whole lot of pain and a whole lot of joy, but a whole lot of uncomfortable stuff. And it seems to take forever, and it's excruciating. And I totally, absolutely. And anything that I or any of us can do to reduce the amount of pain and suffering that others are experiencing, I think at this point in time, that's a really large part of why many of us are here, to participate and to help through our actions and through what we feel drawn to reduce suffering. But interestingly enough, I come to feel more and more and more, part of the reason we actually come into human form, part of the reason we come into human form is actually because there is something here called suffering and discomfort and duality and pain. And the reason we would do this is because these experiences accelerate our soul evolution, or they have the potential, they have the intention of accelerating our evolution. And we actually are willing to jump into these bodies and go through these experiences. It's an act of love. And I'm willing to go through all of this to advance myself, and so that I, in a more advanced state, can assist other people in advancing themselves. That the suffering is not the point, but it's like part of the education, part of the schooling. We experience discomfort because it motivates us. And this has changed my perspective on these types of experiences. Because when I look at it in this way, I'm much less judgmental on what I have to go through. I'm much more okay with the fact that it's not all meant to be wine and roses. And the underlying experience, which I feel most of us do not consciously have, or do not have to a full extent, is learning to trust life. I don't feel there's a person alive that doesn't feel like they've had some to many experiences where not feeling I can trust life would be a natural outcome. Tragedies that occur, that it's like, oh my God, what is that about? You know, in a sense, emotionally, I'm on my own here. You know, this could happen again. Things could happen again. But from this perspective that I'm speaking about, you start to see that although some experiences can be incredibly painful, they are really there for my growth. And over time, perhaps a long period of time, can actually start seeing, wow, because of this thing that occurred, I have become this kind of person that I don't think would have happened if that hadn't occurred. Now, like all the drug commercials on TV, there are side effects to these experiences I'm talking about. I'm not whitewashing them or glorifying them in any way. Some of them are incredibly traumatic. And we're left with needing to treat the symptoms, so to speak, of the side effects. And that can take a long, long time. But the basic impulse is life is continually trying to move us forward. And thus life is on our side. Now we have parts in us that don't necessarily want to move forward. And that's okay also. And the gist of it is, life is in charge. I'm not in charge. I get a small amount of say, and this is my perspective. I get some amount of say in the process, not in the big picture of where it's all going, but at least in terms of how the journey is unfolding. What's my relationship to it? The more that I realize that I integrate and ingest and experience, not as a mental concept, but as a living emotional breathing emotional reality, that life is on my side, no matter what I want to say, no matter what it's throwing at me. That's my old voice. And I still have a lot of the old voice. But whatever is coming up is there to assist me, to help me. And that includes some horrendous things that is hard to see. And I understand it's hard to see. And it doesn't justify anything that is horrendous that somebody does. They go, oh, she needed that, or they needed that. I mean, no, they don't need that. But they don't need it from you. But some experiences had to occur. These are not what we're after. It's not what we're looking for. It's not what we hope for. It's not what we want our children to have to experience. But it's like that we're here. It's fine that we enjoy ourselves and that we appreciate our life and, like the beauty of that is around us and all this. But that's not the totality of why we're here. This is my perspective. We're here to evolve. And all of the experiences that we have, the ones we love and the ones that are really hard to love, the sum total of it is what is evolving us. And the more that I ingest that and imprint that perspective and notice the places in me, both that have grown to accepting this and looking at things that way, and the places where I still have hurt parts that don't look at things that way and wish that it were otherwise. it's this noticing and then the kindness to those parts and accepting those parts as best I can and holding them when they can't take it anymore and not asking them to do any more than they can do in that moment or in that week or in that year. Moving at that pace where I'm bringing along all of me, not just the parts that have got it together and want to progress, but I need to bring the whole package along. The parts of me that are terrified, that are traumatized, they have the right to have their feelings, their fears felt and honored and held. And out of all of this comes a growing integration of all the parts of ourself. And out of that comes a deepening maturity and what I'd call an opening. I'm going to wind this down now, and something just came to mind because this morning I got an email about some growth seminar or something or other, and there was one line in there that caught my eye, and it said, the ancients, when they talked about what occurs before enlightenment, when someone is on the path to enlightenment, whatever that means, I remain open to what it means. That we think that what they would be experiencing before that occurs is bliss, but they knew that what actually people feel before that occurs is more like terror. I found that very reassuring. So I hope that out of what I have been speaking about, that people can feel in themselves a sense of hope, a sense that no matter what's going on or how difficult it is or how bent out of shape one may feel about it, that you're on the good path, that the things that you're feeling that are defined as not spiritual, that is not true. It's not true. All of this is part. Every part that we have is part of the divinity. The parts we like and the parts that we don't like, the parts we're ashamed of, the parts that we're afraid of, all of it. And we can learn to accept and honor and integrate all of those parts. I feel like that's the deepest work on the planet. And the more people who are working this path in their own unique way, and I'm talking about to the millions and ultimately to the billions, this is how the world is going to turn around. This is how the world is going to turn around by enough people changing our relationship with ourselves. So that's it for today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Steve. Always very enlightening. And Gretchen says, thank you, Steve. I appreciate your sharing tonight. It is supportive for me in my current acceptance of my feelings of grief. So
there you go.
Very, very well put.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grief
Thank you,
is
Steve.
Grief is tough. Grief is tough, and grief is something that, to find other people that can hold grief and perhaps hold it with you, I find is really, really important. It's like, who are not trying to fix you or tell you what you need to do, or that you've been grieving now for 34 days and 2 hours and it's time to get over it and all this. because it takes as long as it takes, sometimes years.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Thank you. See you next time.
Yes.